Last weekend, 300 protesters marched through Georgetown and gathered in front of the World Bank building, dressed in black and wearing bandanas over their faces. Tensions were running high when violence broke out between the protesters and the police. With more on this story, we turn to Eagle contributing writer Anthony Jaffee, who originally reported the story for the Eagle. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
I always thought that the IMF was a helpful organization. Why were they protesting?
Well, the IMF and World Bank are development organizations. Their stated goals are to promote financial stability and global development. However, the sense that I got from the people at the protest is that they believe the policies of the IMF are not aimed at developing these countries primarily, but their interests are of promoting the welfare of the corporations, which stand to benefit from a lot of the open free market policies the IMF and World Bank promote. Whether or not that's true, that's debatable, but these people clearly believe the IMF and World Bank are operating in the interest of corporations rather than the interests of poor people in the third world.
I see. Who sponsored the event, and what were the protesters trying to accomplish?
I think it was this loose coalition called the October Coalition. I don't know what organizations really organize it, but I just know it's really a loose coalition of activists. I think the goal is hard to state so clearly. I know these people, the activists, usually have some trouble as far as articulating one monolithic message. As you saw, they went to Georgetown on Friday night, and then they were in front of the IMF and World Bank buildings on Saturday. But it was the annual meeting of the World Bank and the IMF, so in a way I guess it was to demonstrate their disenchantment with these organizations.
I see. You wrote about some of the violence that broke out, and there's quite a bit of it. What was the scene like when you were there?
Well, Friday was the real violent time, if there was a more violent night. And pretty much it was very militaristic. When I first arrived, everyone's dressed in black. Some people were gearing up with goggles. It looks like they're going into battle. Wow. And they're walking a kind of lockstep down the streets of Georgetown with banners. They're chanting, and there are about 1 million police on either side of them. And it's kind of misleading when this violence broke out in a sense, because if you check the website, as far as Friday was concerned, violence was in a sense a goal. They use a kind of euphemism that they would support a diverse menu of options as far as resistance, which pretty much means throwing stuff and tipping trash cans. But pretty much the protests were largely contained. No one was arrested except a couple people, I believe, and most of the violence was just really on the periphery.
You wrote about how a Fox reporter got his camera stolen.
Yes, he did. That was one of the more exciting times. The Fox reporter had a small camcorder, and he kept walking up to this block, or the black bloc as they're called, and he kept trying to ask them about neoliberalism. On each occasion, they tried to steal his camera. I saw twice they almost wrestled it away from him, yet he was persistent, and on the third time, they got the camera from him. It fell to the ground, was smashed, and he chased after them, asking for it back, yet they didn't return it. After that, they went into a chant. I don't know if I can say the F word on this show. I guess that's to be decided by you, but they said F Fox News, and this was the chant. I believe, in a sense, there's, of course, a stigma against Fox News against these more leftist groups, but also he was asking them repeatedly. I don't know their level of annoyance with his persistence when they were marching. I mean, that could have contributed to it as well.
What were some of the reactions you got from the protesters you talked to?
The protesters or the people watching?
There were people watching the protesters protest, or did you interview the protesters?
I tried to interview the protesters.
Okay.
I did talk to a few of them, but a lot of them have a concern. They use the word security culture, in which what they're doing is semi-legal, it's on the edge of the law, and there are police all around, and I think they perceive them as that if they slip up or lose their solidarity for a second, the police could swipe down and arrest them. So it's really hard to get interviews in that scenario, but I was able to talk to a couple after. However, even at the protest Saturday, when that was a perfectly legal and authorized protest, some people were concerned about revealing their names, so I had to quote people anonymously. That was a big concern among AU students. Yeah. And I believe, I mean, like I said before, they believe it's a security culture. I don't know how legitimate these concerns are. It's not something I know, but that is why it's really tough to interview these protesters at times.
Did you talk to any police who were there?
No, police, much harder to talk to.
Really? Okay. Did you learn anything in researching and interviewing for the story that didn't make it into the article for space or whatever reason?
I think I touched on earlier how the anti-IMF, World Bank, anti-globalization movement, a lot of these activists, radicals, there are tons of words that people use to describe these people, and there's not really one monolithic message. That's the problem. And it was clear even at the protests. They marched through Georgetown not so much to protest the IMF or World Bank policies, but also the entire establishment, the capitalism, which they perceive as a corrupt system.
Yeah.
And even one thing I didn't put in, the front of the march had a sign that said, like, something along the lines of end or smash patriarchy, capitalism is supporting it. So you have a lot of different interests. You have people who could be even ardent Stalinists in these groups, believe it or not. And then you have feminists, and you have more
all
peaceful
kind of rolled
people.
up into
It's
one.
a coalition, and sometimes it can be a loosely based coalition. I think that can hurt with how they convey their message as well.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate
No problem.
it. Pleasure having you on the show.
My pleasure.
And we'll be right back after these messages.